Well, my name is Shanoy Smith. I'm a third year student at the University of Technology, where I'm studying communication arts and technology.
Mhm.
It's a very all-rounded course, but my real focus is on public relations and advertising.
Okay.
Okay, so tell me a little about yourself.
Okay. Well, as you know, my name is Kamisha Anderson. I'm a public relations specialist, is the title, I guess. Um, I have a Bachelor of Arts in Journalism, not PR, because that's what I wanted to be until I started interning as a journalist and realized that it's actually not what I wanted. So I got to pivot a bit into PR, but I look at all of it as a communications
Right.
industry, so it's neither here nor there for me. I'm from Clarendon originally. I attended the Edwin Allen High School. No, I do not run. Yeah, that's basically it. I currently work as the internal public relations officer for China Harbor Engineering Company, but I also freelance with small to medium sized businesses.
That's wonderful. And I feel like a lot of journalism students, especially in my year group, they they dip in and out of public relations as well. So
Mhm.
yeah, I definitely understand. So a career in public relation wasn't the goal or originally in the beginning.
Actually, I didn't even know that there was a thing as public relations. I I've always wanted to be a journalist. You know, I'm inquisitive, I love to write, that sort of thing. And that was almost a perfect fit for journalism. So I applied to Karamak as a journalism student.
Okay.
But it was while at Karamak that I realized that there was something called in integrated marketing and communication. But I had no interest in that. My goal was to become a journalist. Um, but it was after leaving university and by chance happening to work closely with somebody who works in PR that I realized that that was actually something that I could do.
Great. So how long have you been in the industry, in the PR?
A little over 5 years. I would say I got into it sort of right out of university
Okay.
because in my final year, I broke the news to my counselor at Karamak that I actually did not want to become a journalist, which was quite shocking because I was good at it. Um, and I had interned at the Gleaner, and they were prepared to take me back once I finished university, but I didn't want to do that. So she told me to take the summer and think about what I wanted to do, and if I didn't figure it out, I could go to the Gleaner, be a reporter until I figured it out. But about 3 days after my final exam, I got the call that there was this World Bank funded project at the University of the West Indies just starting up, and they wanted somebody to come and help with the communication and the writing.
Right.
And that's where I met someone who was working in PR. And just from watching what he was doing, I realized that that was actually an option.
That's wonderful. Okay, so since you've been in PR for 5 years, right?
Mhm.
What does PR mean to you at this point in time?
Right. For most people, when speaking to them, I say I'm a brand journalist because a lot of people don't understand the difference between PR and marketing.
Right.
So to differentiate it, I say I'm a brand journalist instead of regular journalists who tell news stories or sports stories and so on. I tell a company's story. So I'm a storyteller. I try to position whatever brand I'm representing in the best light. PR, everybody needs PR. That's how I see every individual, every company, every brand needs PR. PR builds reputation, it builds trust. It's one thing for you to advertise and say, I can do this or I can do that or this is who I am. But for somebody else to say it, that is, I find, is also very important. And that is something that a lot of people do not know, a lot of companies do not understand, especially small companies just starting. So I see PR as a fundamental thing that every company, every brand should have. Yeah.
I agree. I 100% agree. PR is
Mhm.
needed in across every sector, every industry. Okay,
Right.
so what what is it like working in the industry? Like looking at it from my point of view, I'm in school and everything. It's
Mhm.
all exciting to me. But what is it actually like working, especially as like a brand journalist, as you put it?
Mhm. It's very hard work. And I think that's one of the things that a lot of people don't understand about PR because they see PR pros and they go to fancy events and they drink
Mhm.
wine and they rub shoulders with everybody. They get to know everybody. But behind the scenes, they don't see actually how hard PR is. Because to buy a spot in the Gleaner, to buy a full page ad, there are always salespeople who are ready to roll out the red carpet for you because they're getting money. To
Right.
convince a journalist to do a story on your client is much more difficult because there are thousands of companies, thousands of people trying to get into that spot. So for you to convince them to do the story on your client is much more difficult than a lot of people realize. And when you're just starting out, you're going to get so many no's and so many people just not responding to your pitch or not responding to your emails. I actually had one editor hung up the phone on me. So behind the scenes, the work is pretty tedious,
Mhm.
especially when you're just starting out.
I understand. Hmm.
Mhm.
It really does sound like a lot of work. Okay, so
Not not to not to scare you,
no,
but it
no, no, definitely not.
when you're just starting out and nobody knows who you are, none of the reporters, none of the editors, they don't know you. To get them to agree to a story, you have to be very strategic. You have to be very good with it. I feel like that was my campaign.
Wonderful. That's wonderful. Okay. My recording stopped for a second now. But anyways, how would you describe your personal brand?
Uh, my personal brand is under construction, and here's why. Um, I focus so much on the brands that I'm representing that
Right.
I don't put as much effort into my own. But I think also that personal brand is not always something that you have to work on. It's also how people see you.
Right.
So if you speak to any one of my clients, former clients, companies I work with, it's what they can tell you about me. And what they can tell you is that I'm a very flexible person. That was one of the first things that one of my first clients said. If I come to the event and my role is just PR, if you need somebody to help set up, I'm ready. I'm there. And you'll find as a PR pro that you do those things. You're going to at some point become the personal assistant to the CEO for some reason. You don't know how you got there, but you're just going to have to do it because the work depends on it. So
Right.
I'm very flexible. I'm also very careful in what I say and what I do because I understand that everything you say and everything you do is PR. So I'll never be on Twitter just popping off randomly. You'll never see that from me. So I'm very careful with how I represent myself.
Wonderful. That's great, actually. Do you have like a personal website or page that students can locate you, find you?
No, I don't have a I have a blog that I just launched, but it's not necessarily about PR. It would just be my LinkedIn that you can go and see what I've done.
Okay, wonderful. I'll be sure to link that. Um, and lastly, but not lastly, but what are some of the challenges that you faced while in the industry?
I think the major one would be just the people who matter not knowing who I am. And that is just something that everybody entering the industry will have to go through. Sending emails and not getting a response. Also, you'll find that journalists tend to not respond to emails overall. So even if they know who you are, they tend to not respond. And when you call them, they say, "Oh yeah, man, I saw it and I was about to respond." They weren't gonna respond until you call them. But just starting out and them not knowing who I am, that was a challenge. Also, with working in house, you find that you have a lot of responsibilities outside of PR. So working in agency, you have multiple clients and that's a challenge. Working in-house, you have multiple roles and that's a challenge. So both of them is a challenge. It's just which one you're willing to work with and for how long. What other challenge? I don't particularly like event management. It's too stressing, but it's part of PR, so you just have to do it.
Right.
um, what other challenge? I think PR in and of itself is just one big challenge, and you just have to deal with it.
Okay, last question. You've dropped so many gems throughout this interview, but what advice, like the biggest advice that you can give a student or an upcoming PR practitioner?
I would say you're gonna have to love it. If you don't love it, you're going to quit. And it's just that simple because it looks flashy on the outside. I remember some years ago, I was working with couple with pork, and I don't know if you understand how the whole pig farming works, but when it's time for them to slaughter the animal goes into one big giant refrigerator. And I spent the entire day in that big giant refrigerator, and I was freezing.
Hmm.
And I thought, if I didn't love this, I would quit right now because there are going to be times when you really just want to quit. So you have to love it because it's behind the scenes. It's very hard work. We have events and we're there. We dress nice and we have a glass of wine in our hands and everything looks great. But behind the scenes, people won't understand the amount of hard work and frustration and the graphic designer not finishing the graphics on time and the photographer showing up late and the host is messing up the whole event and the people on the outside will not understand the amount of work that goes into it. But
Right.
you're going to experience all of that, and so you have to love it. If you don't love it, you can always pivot into something else. But to work as a PR pro, you have to love it because it's very hard work. Oh, and CEOs never listen to you. Yeah,
Okay, thank you so much, Miss Anderson. Really enjoyed
no
this
problem.
interview. You did so well.